Good afternoon. I'm Paul Ellis, Curtis's brother. We want to thank you all for coming, some from very far away, to celebrate Curtis's life.
United States, very far away, and I really appreciate coming here.
To celebrate Curtis's life. He had a rich, varied life and established deep connections.
So many people, professionally and personally.
A number of them want to speak today and share their cherished memories of Curtis. I know we all feel deep sorrow because of our loss, but we wish to tell our stories with joy and celebrate the kind, gentle, and important person that was our brother.
But we're all here to tell our stories with joy and celebrate the kind, gentle, and important person
that was our brother. It's much appreciated if the speakers would take off their masks at the podium and put them back on at the podium when they're finished.
And I'm going to leave that mask on. Just remember that. Our first speaker is a friend of Curtis's, well, not friend of Curtis's, Dr. Rabbi.
There are certain things in life one does not expect to do, especially when someone is much younger than they are, which is to appear or speak at a memorial for Curtis, who was certainly younger than I, and who had the energy that never seemed to quit a moment. So at moments like these, it's often the case where people dwell on the pain that we've experienced, but I'd rather look at this from a different perspective for just a moment and begin to think about the impacts of one person on the local level. There is a, putting on my political scientist hat, there is a very important professor at NYU, he's a comparative scientist, and he's written several important books. One of them is called The Crisis of Democracy, where he makes very clear that the economics around us, the failure to protect people who work with us, and to protect those jobs, will ultimately, if there is any variable that we know about, will ultimately destroy democracy. That the decline of labor unions, the failure to negotiate contracts, the capacity for those who seek cheap labor to continue to do so at tremendous cost to those who work for them, may in fact be one of the death knells to the very system we all boast here. Curtis Ellis understood this very clearly. He spent his life, the last few years of it, doing nothing but fighting against unfair trade agreements that were put in place to undermine working people and to benefit the few at the great cost of many. And when I first met him, it was interesting. I think it was about the same time. He was working for somebody I thought was a lunatic at that time. And he was a lunatic. So it probably is. But you know, he was very unusual. But he had an idea, and Curtis bought into the right way, right to slow. And we had to stop the very practice that I just described from the first. And Curtis lit up with energy about that because he thought protecting people and their right to live as human beings mattered. The only way he did that was by protecting their jobs and their life. So he spent the rest of his life from that point forward doing that in a lot of ways. I mean, from a couple of people, but he valued people. I remember when he was at CNN, and he called me and said, "Hey, would you like?" Because I worked at CNN before, and I've been a great contributor for a long time. And he said, "Look, would you like to come on the Solid O'Brien show?" I said, "Sure, why not?" I can arrange it. So, you know, all things being equal, it wasn't exactly Curtis, it wasn't exactly normal, but it was very interesting. It had interesting twists in all ways. Because everything he did had that twist. It was very interesting and unusual and different and energetic with that smile and that great laugh. And it said, "Come on over." So I went to the show and I sat the first morning and there was this line. There was this line where at the end of the sequence, at the end of the piece that you were on, she said, "Oh, what music do you over here today?" And I said, "Well, I like these little songs." And And the next piece of news they came up with was that the Sikhs had been murdered in the Midwest in a terrible barbaric attack the day before. And it was crazy and it didn't fit, but it showed about how the world works. That things often don't fit. That we do things that people do things around us that don't make any sense whatsoever. Curtis symbolized and lived a life of intense interest, constant change and surprise. Nothing was the same, always different in a lot of ways. But in other ways, he was a traditionalist. He believed and he valued human beings. He believed in the nature of work. He believed in finding exciting things and challenges. He also believed that each of us had great worth. That you had to work really hard for him to be complaining about you. You had to work really hard for him to look and say, you had nothing worthwhile, whether it was, he wasn't the guy who sat around and complained about you. He was on to the next challenge. So maybe it's best to think about it before I read the two pieces of film that I think are important. Maybe it's important to think about the traditionalist in him that had those values, and maybe exemplified by the music he loved, how to collect, and Matt and I were just talking about it before. He liked Sinatra. Now maybe we think about Sinatra for a second as the most important and certainly the loudest voice of the 20th century, one that is most recognizable throughout the world, still to this day in many places. You go into an elevator, you're going to give Sinatra. But I think of Curtis, and I think of one particular rendition of a song from Alcohol, Point of No Return. It says, he says in the song, the lyrics of a song written by U.B. Blake, a great jazz pianist of the 20th century, called Blessing. Memories of You. And he says, look, the lyrics are as follows: waking skies at sunrise, every sunset too. Everything seems to bring memories. When you see someone being respected for what they do, the life that they are living, the life they are living, no matter what color their tie or shirt, or the skin color, or the job they do, think of Curtis Ellis. He would want you to think of him in that way, because that's who he was. He was that kind of person. The quality of the person mattered with great level. That is what I remember most, and I want to thank you for making the sun shine brighter than it usually does on this particular day, and for making the world a better place and changing it in the ways that he did by his very presence. Now, some may not remember this, but those of us who are blessed by God to know him will remember that. We will remember that smile, that face, and we will remember the things that he did, because they had tremendous value. So, my friend, till we meet again, please, I'm going to read two Psalms by David for you, which I think have value. I'm going to read them in English, not in Hebrew, so that no one will have to worry about translating. This is Psalm 91. You who dwells in the shelter of the Most High will rise in the shadow beyond the presence. I say to you of the Lord, who is my refuge and my stronghold, my God in whom I trust. They will save you from the ensnaring trap, from the destructive pestilence. He will cover you with his pinions, and you will find refuge under his wings. His truth is a shield and an armor. You will not fear the terror of the night, but the arrow that flies by day, the pestilence that prowls in the darkness, or the destruction of madness. 1,000 may fall to your left, and 10,000 on your right, but it will never reach you. You don't look with your eyes, you will see the retribution of the wicked. For as you have said, the Lord is my shelter, and you made the Most High your heaven. No evil will befall you, no plague will come near your tent. God will instruct his angels on your behalf to guard you in all your ways. Certainly no one fought that I know. Deserve that kind of send off from curse. Be protected from evil around him, because he made good for everything. Psalm, this would be, forgive me. This would be, okay, a psalm that says, when out of the depths I call to my Lord, hearken to my voice. Let your ears be attentive to the voice of my pleas. God, if you would preserve iniquities, my Lord, who would survive. But forgiveness is with you, that you may be feared. I hope in the Lord, my soul hopes, that I long for his word. My soul yearns for the Lord more than the night watchman waiting for the morning. Wait for the morning, Israel. Put your hopes in the Lord, for the Lord there is kindness. For him there is an abounding deliverance, and he will redeem Israel from all its iniquity. Remember what I just said in there. Very important. Be attentive to the voice of my. In Judaism, We believe strongly in the protection of those who are not as strong, who may be weak, and who need deliverance. Thank you. Thank you very much. Curtis. Thanks. My turn. This may not be easy. First thing I want to do is thank Maxine. Thank you.
From the bottom of my heart. You were magnificent taking care of my little brother.
That's the word. Magnificent. They took care of me. It was quick the whole time. It's all heart. It's all pure love. The one thing count on is you were there
Every minute.
every
Your love was so wonderful to watch.
so
Thanks for being my little brother's rock.
my little brother. Curtis is my little brother. You are little brother. There's two of us. There's three of us.
Curtis was our little brother.
Our little brother. With three Ellis twins.
Me, my twin brother, Rick, who will tell you a little more later, and Kurt.
Don't ask me why. He's in Kansas. Curtis. Not
One thing is as certain as certainty can be.
as certain as I'm standing here now.
The Ellis brothers love each other. Nothing will change that. From the time Kurt came home with our mother, Rick and I knew Kurt was special. He was our little brother. You don't really get any more special than that.
When he finally could talk, he was a late talker.
When he could talk, he called us Ricky Paul.
He knew something we didn't realize. We were brothers.
And as we grew, we came to understand that we were as important to him as he was to us. Curtis was one of a kind. He was the embodiment of sarcasm and wit. He got the irony in things. He saw the flip side, the big joke. It was easy for him to be comfortable around all kinds of people simply because he found humor in it all.
You mentioned his laugh. His laugh is everybody remembers. If you Curtis, it's going to be his laugh. He made you feel comfortable because he was there. It was the laugh, it was his laugh. He was kind of
Kurt was in on the cosmic joke. He and I spent lots of time laughing.
Making jokes, laughing. You hear it now.
No matter how serious the situation, he still got the joke. He understood the irony in being alive, the built-in contradictions in life. We live, we love, we laugh, and then it's gone. I know he'd find humor in that. Is he gone? Where did he go? There's a part of us that has nothing to do with time and space, life and death. If we accept that we are more than this material world, that this body houses our true being, then we realize no one is ever gone. We are more than this package. Without it, we still exist. We can find joy in knowing Curtis is here now, with us, and will always be here. Curtis lives now outside of time and space, and as such, he is able to be with us as we finish our travels in this material world. We can find joy in knowing Curtis is here now, with us, and will always be here. He spent his life seeking honesty, truth, and above all, wisdom, all of which he willingly shared. His goal in life was simple: fair play. He only wanted what was good for all mankind. No matter what incarnation he took, whether raging radical or staunch conservative, Curtis only sought to make life better for us all. As complicated as he may have appeared, he was quite simple. Curtis felt for us all and worked hard.
Now, on screen, Steve Bannon.
All right, Scott. Yeah. Hi. You said it. That's a six. That was only testing. So I understand. I apologize. I cannot hear you, but I understand you can hear me. I'm greatly honored to be invited today to speak at the service for my good friend and colleague, Curtis Ellis. I had a very nice blazer to wear to the service today, but I realized if I had Curtis would be the first to tease me and make fun of the fact that I wasn't wearing what he called the good luck jacket from 2016. You know, I knew Curtis and worked with Curtis many years before I met Donald Trump. Curtis was an individual that we had up on the Breitbart side, writing about economic nationalism, writing about China, and writing about what was needed to make sure that the American worker was treated fairly, that had fair compensation and had a fair working life. Curtis was a champion of not just the American worker. Curtis was a champion of workers everywhere. And everything he did in trying to attack the Chinese Communist Party was done with the benefit of the Chinese worker, allowed by Jean, all 100 names in mind. In fact, one of the ways I actually learned that term was through Curtis Ellis many years ago. And so it was a great honor to work with him and to really see him and his ideas about the American worker, his ideas about the American family, American society, but really how that went across borders. Although he was an economic nationalist, he was really a advocate for the fair treatment of workers everywhere, and his great focus on the really the totalitarian dictatorship in China was really about what had happened to the Chinese worker, what had happened to the individuals in China that were really part of the slave labor process. Many years before people focus on the Uyghurs or people focus on other aspects of it. In that regard, you know, Curtis was really a giant. He was an intellectual giant. He, along with Peter Navarro, are really the two intellectual architects of this what is the MAGA movement. Really, it transcends politics and really transcends partisan politics. There's so much of what people believed in, and so much of what we work for. You can look at really populists on the left, and many of our beliefs are absolutely the same about low employment, about wages, about the ability of families to actually have one wage earner that can support an entire family. And that's what Curtis Ellis fought for his entire life, and was incredibly proud to be able to be a small part of that. You know, there's when the history of the century is written, in the early part of this century, which will be, I think, really the central part will be about the freedom of the Chinese people and the freedom of the Chinese worker. Curtis will be at the forefront of really the intellectuals that made that happen. So Curtis was a fighter. He never gave up. And towards the end, obviously, when he was struck down by this horrible disease, he fought to the end. But I was just looking at last night, all the pieces he wrote in the fall, all the pieces he wrote all the way through election day. It was the same fight and the same determination and the same grit that he had always had. So I was honored to be his friend, honored to be his colleague. But most important, was honored to actually know him and know the great work that he did and the great work he did for the freedom, not just for his fellow citizens here in the country, of every race, ethnicity, religion, gender, but really the work he did for all humankind. And so today, my tribute is to really a great patriot, a great hero, and a great defender of the working man throughout the entire world. Thank you.
Thank you. Everyone to be heard. Thank you for being here. Our next speaker is. That's on my glasses. I'm sorry. That's on my glasses. Our next speaker is Curtis' friend, Moynihan, journalist, artist. Journalist and artist, let's cover that. A journalist and artist and a Tibetan activist.
Thank you so much for Maxine, for asking me to speak about my friend Curtis. Maxine asked me to talk about Curtis as the quintessential New Yorker. Well, that indeed he was. What are the qualities that make New York the heart of the world and make everyone want to come to our city? What is a New Yorker? A New Yorker is generous, civil, smart, stylish, and of course, witty. Remarkably so. Curtis personified all these qualities, and yes, he was the quintessential. We lived in the same East Village neighborhood. We often met at a tiny, charming little Japanese bistro. We shared a love for our local pubs, bookstores, Victorian masonry, the French gargoyles, the German streets. Curtis also liked to meet local parks, Stuyvesant Park, Union Square. Often liked to quote the Athenian pledge. We do not imitate, but we are examples of others. Again, in this, which was the quintessential New York. My father, Senator Moynihan, once wrote in one of his monthly newsletters to his constituents, I forbear to say that New Yorkers are better than that risks spiritual pride, but I will say that you're smart. Always in this Curtis was the quintessential. Taught me it was so much fun because he just knew something about everything. Art, dance, music, great books, religions, philosophy. He was an eloquent defender of the Christian tradition and the rule of law, now under attack from all quarters, here in the United States. He knew that the rule of law was the foundation of all things we New Yorkers hold dear. And our poets and artists, our loves and figures, which have all been strangled by the CCP virus. These things were precious and worth fighting for. Reggie supported my Tibetan work for so many people, treated dismissively. He understood the dangers of the CCP and his prodigious talents. He could have earned riches on Wall Street or in corporate clothes, but he just cared too much about the legal part. Curtis Mark shared disdain to the latest incarnation of the hard left, the woke crew. We New Yorkers do not need a lecture about tolerance, diversity, and inclusion. Those are the qualities that have always made our city a magnet to the world. Last night, thinking about today, I walked through our East Village home, imagining that Curtis was with me. I felt that our city was slowly coming back to life. The Irish pubs, the Ukrainian Community Center, the Polish Diner, the mosque, the synagogue, the Episcopal Church, the Hindu bookstore. And then I went to Stuyvesant Park, where I stood before Picker Meeting House, the Church of the Abolitionists, and I thought, Curtis, as a great abolitionist, trying to defeat the world from the scourge, great slave owners for a time, Chinese communist party. And then I thought of this poem by the 14th century Persian symphony, Shining Temple, and thanks for reading this. Iron love, ruined hearts are rebuilt, and from your sorrow, miserable souls are made happy. You gave me the knowledge which reveals the world, and said, here, come into the tavern of ruin and drink the wine. For it's a wine freshly poured into the goblet of the heart. I myself abandoned the man of intellect for the purity of the people of love. I put on pilgrim's clothes and traveled. I saw him spinning in the air, an intense drunken terror, multiplying, increasing, breath by breath. The whole world and everything in it, drowned before a drop of love. And that's when I knew that everything throughout the world, everywhere into me, is but a reflection of the way. Friends, farewell the person of your friend. Please find me in the next life.
Our next speaker is a friend of Curtis's. Everybody here is a friend of Curtis's, so I better keep repeating myself. A friend of Curtis's, Jen Black. Who'd like to say a few words?
I guess I'm so honored to ask the opportunity to say a few words about some other Curtis experience. Right in with Curtis's passion for the American worker. I first met Curtis in 2004, in Buffalo, New York, when a good friend of mine, Jack Davis, decided to run for Congress in New York's 26th district. Jack, after 40 years of building life for our manufacturing business, from a garage startup with a factory employed local 112 employees. But in 2001, his business came under attack by the Chinese who were manufacturing the same products in China and marketing them in America at prices below Jack's cost. Jack initially and I spoke to New York Congressman Tom Reynolds about this situation, but Tom Reynolds took no action to stop the Chinese stealing of American dollars. So in 2004, Jack decided to run against Mr. Reynolds for Congress, and Curtis became aware of Jack's efforts to take on the Chinese and reached out to assist Jack in his congressional bid. Jack appointed Curtis as his campaign manager and based his campaign on the theme of ongoing disastrous free trade practices that had caused the falling out of American manufacturing since the 80s and the 90s. Campaign platform to save American jobs. The cast, of course, rolled into Buffalo from New York City and gave all his all for the campaign. Unfortunately, Jack didn't win the congressional race, and Curtis returned to New York 2010, Curtis conceived of creating the nonprofit American Job Alliance, and Jack Davis provided our initial support. The AJA mission is to educate Americans about the negative impacts of the free trade agreements such as NAFTA on American workers and to promote Buy American and Hire American policy. We quickly learned that the free trade is good for everyone mantra was deeply embedded in the seats of American power, including Wall Street, global manufacturing giants, and the Washington establishment, causing any real change was a huge challenge in the early years. But Curtis never wavered for a single moment in his single-minded pursuit of putting American workers first. For example, Curtis played a significant role in the AJ's efforts to prevent the Trans-Pacific Partnership from being ratified in the 2012 era. Subsequently, Curtis carried his passion for the American workers into the Donald Trump for President campaign and served as a member of the transition team. In early 2020, Curtis created a website to distribute boycott China window stickers. It is certain that all working Americans owe a huge debt of gratitude to Curtis. His steadfast, single-minded efforts on their behalf over the decades. AJA board member Michelle Nasher-Hoff says, I had the pleasure of becoming one of Curtis's friends in 2011. When I was asked to join the board of directors for AJA, I did not have the opportunity to personally meet Curtis until 2017, when he was working as a special advisor to the Secretary of Labor as part of President Trump's transition team. Subsequently, he took a key position as communications consultant and senior policy advisor with American First Policies. Curtis was a true patriot and defender of liberty, who believed in all the greatness of our country and devoted much of his life to putting America first in economic policies to benefit American workers, not just Wall Street. He will never be forgotten. Another board member, Greg Otley, co-authored with Peter Navarro of Death by China, and former national White House liaison, and President Trump says, I'm proud to have been able to work with Curtis for more than a decade to support American manufacturing jobs and our nation's future. Curtis was a tough, straight-talking man of action, and with a heart of gold, he genuinely cared about the outcomes for workers, business owners, and those living under the boot hill of China's authoritarian regime. In the long, hard, fair fight for trade, Curtis was always there with a good idea and support the company. And lastly, Michael Stuma, who is the CEO for the Coalition Across America, says Curtis is one of the only political campaign leaders focused on returning jobs and industry to America. He worked as both a Democrat and a Republican because party affiliation was secondary to his values. Curtis blazed a trail that became both Make America Great and Build Back Better. He was one of the very talented few who could quickly transform a complicated economic topic into an easily understandable and compelling narrative that can motivate people to act. Curtis will be sorely missed. In short, Curtis had a love affair with America and believed that we have to fight to save America to create jobs and prosperity. We need to up our game, as you would say, and bring higher paying manufacturing jobs back to America. This is the best way we can honor his memory and carry on the torch. We and us will continue to work every day to carry on his legacy. Curtis was certainly a giant among men.
Thank you. Our next speaker is a friend, obviously a friend, and a neighbor of hers, a filmmaker, Nancy Cullen.
Thank you, Nancy. I met Curtis in '94 in front of the building found out that he had gotten the apartment I wanted, I really didn't want to like him. But he was such a great guy. Every time I wanted to go off, he would say, come over, I'll be back. I had peace in his bathtub. Always your husband. My dog Darling needed a babysitter. I don't know if there's like dogs, but it's okay. He was such a great neighbor. He was traveling, maybe he was working in Washington, but his downstairs neighbor Jack wasn't doing well. And he reached out to me and to Francesca so that we could go over and help Jack. He keep everybody in mind. The most wonderful thing he did for me when I struck with self-imposed drama in my life by finding a lost laptop and it became a newspaper headline. And I was very afraid to make this. And I called her and said, Jack learned about it. We'll get you on CNN, which he did. And he stood there and held my hand and said, "Don't my truth." It was so kind. And now to read a letter from his very close friend Joe. I was friends with Curtis for over 30 years. I met him when he was hosting the radio show that was being on in New York City. Back when he was president. We were on the same wavelength. Our conversations flowed often late into the night. They were spiced with revelatory insights and big values. He invited me on his radio show a number of times and made meaningful introductions for me, such as with authors Robert and Tom Wilson, theoretical physicist Michio Kaku, both of whom I included in one of my documentary films. Curtis was always in transition. He transitioned from a progressive to a libertarian to a conservative, but always took with him his keen intelligence and fighting wit. Sometime in the mid-90s, he needed to move out of his digs on East 20th Street in a hurry. I offered my apartment, but he crashed for a while. That time period was a convergence of circumstance for both of us, as we were now moving into bachelors. In this private setting, he confided things in me, and I in him, and it further cemented our deep bond. I recall the time when he took a trip to China and called me at 3:30 in the AM, happily drunk, saying he was making toast. I couldn't recall the joke I had told him last month. He asked me to please repeat it so he could make the toast properly. Upon his return, he reported that it was a big hit in Beijing. Curtis was the walking embodiment of mutual aid. You were lucky enough to be his loyal friend. You knew you could always count on him. Likewise, he always knew you had his back. In one of our last phone conversations, we discussed how even though we disagreed politically on many issues, we would always be lifelong friends. Yes, he agreed, because we're both grown-ups. I'm going to tell him when you use the word grown-up and not adult. So often adults never grow up. To be his friend was to witness the soul always reaching, expanding his abilities and talent, and always growing. He was a one of a kind. And it's because of his spirit, one that honors growth and human endeavor, that he lives on in all our memories.
Thank you, Nancy. The next speaker is a friend of both Curtis and Maxine. They were fortunate enough to spend many Seder's at this person's home. More Seder's than I went to. Paul Fry.
Let me know if you can't hear. Maxine Curtis has spent maybe 25 years of savings in their house at least. And in our savings, we talk about the meaning of the story. We don't have a lot of kids there. We really delve into it. And of course, The story, I believe, had a lot of resonance for Curtis. Because as we all know, the story of Exodus is the story of another man who dedicated probably most of his life to trying to better the working conditions of the Egyptians who were working. The men he built, the baby Moses worked for, kind of an autocratic guy, maybe a little bit of a bully. That's a story for another day. Part of the story that we never really talked about in our statement, but I would love to discuss, Curtis, is really the end of the story today. God takes Moses, shows him the promise, says, "Yeah." I always thought this was unfair. Maybe that is the point of the story. Life is unfair. Maybe the point of the story is that none of us get the promised land. It's the journey. After 40 years of the wilderness, you get to see it. Well, what a mission for us.
Next we have Paul Eckinger, journalist, a longtime friend of theirs who worked with him for many, many years.
I first met Curtis when we both worked at the launcher in DC. I'm based in New Jersey. We both make the long reverse suit. Really unlike the hours, staggering, period, and what was essentially a factory environment. Yet it didn't offer much of a chance for people to get to know each other. But that was never pitched on Curtis. It was always outgoing, friendly, and prepared. Most of his stress had but it was kind. Curtis was always Natalie attire, jacket and tie, sometimes even a suit. But even though his dress was formal, he was anything but. I was lucky to work with him. So Pastor Riley and me, he helped me get through this type of situation. His impish and ironic sense of humor, and he always had an interesting take on whatever we were covered in on the innocent as well. In it, and no one was watching legend industry. He observed that our audience was so low that advertisers would be better off just calling viewers individuals. When we found ourselves working slow news weekends, we kept simply seeing an offer invite restaurant chains for coaching sessions. And I remember once when the chef, very upscale Russian restaurant, brought in caviar of a quality way above any as we could ever afford. First figured out caviar once it had been opened was something the chef would not take back with him. Some of these caviar was also beyond the radar of most of our musical colleagues. So Curtis made sure to take as many trips as possible at their display station. And after a while, the news chef would notice, and he asked us what we did. And probably, and I'll always remember, he said, "Yes, it's always the right." And Curtis was to be always the right. After MSNBC, we worked on finding each other freelancing. At one point, he was producing live online coverage of the units, supposing for the Italian media company. So that place was needed. I don't remember what the topic of the conference was. Did, but I remember that we had a great time putting together temporary news organization. And when I was working at Time.com, I was able to work with live online news and work on pieces for the magazine. What I really remember about that particular day were the very guests that we brought. We said, let's put together a joint state issues, our house. Fuller office, kind of steward purpose. And those look completely new ways of looking at it, which can't be over different worlds or different. That's how we approach the problems of the most important. Deciding to overseas outsourcing. Back. But to make more progress on the labor issues, so people should be marginalized. Before, I still work very long. In fact, the past numbers give it. But then I realized I had to really get in touch with her as much during the years to fight against. Look at a year and a half ago when he called, I did. I really discovered how much I missed the way. Sat at dinner. One thing after another thing, right? So then process. For me, got their violence back. Basically, pointed out Republicans who Obama supported team. I think it was part of the people. Obama's favor. All Stephen Miller and Jeff Sessions. Shows it totally paper inside Trump hit. That's how I react. Scared. It wasn't difficult, but I understood why. It's free. So much, but it's fear. Versus hatred. And not that. That's probably the part. You see by that. I felt that. I said, for others to have to say, that I mentioned first. Myself. Part and election role. Of course, there is a
Now we're going to hear from Mike Leatherfall of Sportsman TV and broadcast Hollywood Curtis. And as everybody else here, is a dear friend. He's reading so appropriate. Everybody's a dear friend. Thanks for coming.
So you've been hearing about many facets of Curtis's life. We helped, we promoted, we believed in what he wrote about. My memories focus on his consistency, his beliefs in why it's important to promote America first, and his consistency in leading American work. First was deeply concerned for many years about American jobs moving overseas. New assembly line manufacturing plants, opening up elsewhere, taking with the jobs and piece of the American future. He wrote about this continuously, talked about it on TV every week, and made its main focus throughout the Trump presidency as Curtis and a true ally in the White House who believed in the same principles. As part of Curtis's consistency was his friendship to the buildings to spot people in his work, bring them together to join forces, help each other develop their own friendships. He was very good at this, and he had a very keen eye. There was a deep respect amongst these groups that started to bond together that Curtis enjoyed and appreciated his lives. Many of us are determined to keep this alive and not sit back and say, keep leading our friendship to new acquaintances. All developed by Curtis, alive to go larger in networks, keep us connected and simple. Another aspect of Curtis
Curtis, which I deeply appreciate, which is writing these literary skills. He zoned in, you were going to get well-written, thorough TV news script, and of course, the savors by magazine and newspaper stories, which was always left the reader thinking and questioning the status quo. Writing is an art, and for sure a skill. Curtis pulled the English craft over the years. He is the man. I had a number of federal agencies in the past years to help with their press releases, positioning statements from multimedia groups. My friends within these agencies would say that when we received his work, we never changed the word. We lost the Whitman folks, a well-rounded, seasoned expert on subject matters, laser focused on the American worker in this tough time where ethics and morals matter here, but not necessarily on the side of the world. This bothered Curtis, and we talked about what it would take to get those jobs back, and the dangers of the important commodities that were just laid there. We lost a champion who mattered, who was respected, appreciated, and needed. The previous administration said they needed 4 more years to get things done. We imagine if Curtis had his help and had 4 more years, we would all be better off. Rest in peace, Curtis. We miss you. Now, John Fredericks, who describes himself as Curtis's best friend and frequent political comrade in arms.
I don't use Mike, I'm just gonna stand here, it's all right. Maxine, you were so phenomenal, Curtis, for so long. And in those last days, you were there for him like I've never seen anybody. And I tell you what, Maxine, Curtis is smiling on you right now. You're a special and wonderful woman. And you see the love that he's getting here today, it's incredible. Curtis Ellis was my best friend. And so I talked to Curtis every single day. Not a day went by 7 days a week that we didn't talk or text. Nothing I did or he did, we did without talking to each other. Should we do this? Should we write about that? I would edit his pieces. He would edit mine. I sent the piece to be like, that sucked. Let's redo it. He came on my radio show. I have a radio show in the morning. You know, Curtis, he's not a morning guy. Doesn't like morning, right? So I'm on from 6 to 10. So you can forget that. Yeah, you can forget the 6 a.m. hour. He didn't do that. He like 8:30. That was his time. And when he came on my show, this is even hard to believe. He came on my radio show every week for 10 years, except when he was overseas or when he was with Maxine traveling on vacation. He was on my show every week for 10 years and solving all the problems of the world. And he would get wound up. After a while, I would realize that if I needed a break, I could ask him the right question to trigger him. And he would just go off for 10 minutes. I could go get a cup of coffee, I get a cigarette, come back, he'd still be talking. So it was like a mini break within the show. Both of us stayed with the Trump administration in Washington, D.C. So I'm just going to tell a few stories that I made because for me, I lost my best friend. I lost my right arm. I lost my compass of life. Curtis was my compass. And we bounced everything off each other. And to lose that it's very difficult. To just one day it's gone because of the relationship we had and the love for each other. Anyway, we both would go in DC, but he would always come over to my house, which was in Eastern Market, which was a lot more fun. He was the DuPont circle, that was where the elites were. I was out with the people. So he would come on the metro, and he had stopped drinking a long time ago. Went through that, and he was sober. But I didn't. And so we'd come over, and we were writing a book, or whatever we were doing. And he would just get going, and I would, have a few vodka tonics, we'd start to laugh. And he would say to me, he'd say, if anybody could ever see us now, it's like the drunk Catholic and the sober Jew. How do we do this? So then we're writing this book, and then we're saying, what should we title it? And I'm like, I got it, Trump for Dummies. And he's like, no, that's not gonna work, he's not gonna tweet it out. And then he's like, I got it, the Catholic
and a Jew. I said, well, that's not gonna work, nobody's gonna read that. So we would go back and forth with that. But the thing about Curtis you gotta realize is his sense of humor was incredible. And there were times I would be on the radio with certain people, and he would start texting me during the segment because he'd be tuned in. And I would start laughing in the middle of the interview, just reading his text. Finally, I used to have to turn my phone off until I got done with it. But he would come to my house and we would like, he was only order Chinese food. That was his thing. He liked Chinese food. But we got to eat a lot. Curtis loved to eat, but he loved people. He was so full of life. That was the thing about Curtis. He was full of life. Last time I saw him, we were at a rooftop in Washington, D.C. for election night, doing my show there. And he was one of my panelists. He was always with me. Everything we did, he was always there. And we had Trump won that night, so we went to bed and thought Trump was the winner. And of course, it didn't quite turn out that way, but that was the last time I actually saw him. And the last dialogue I had with him was a day, actually, before he went to hospice. I called him, and he said, I called him, and then he texted me. And sometimes we can't answer the text. And he said, I'll call you later. And the later never came. I talked to him again when he was ready to pass and did what I had to do, but the later never came. But just a few quick stories about Curtis because he was so funny. Before Trump ran in 2015, he was head of the American Jobs Alliance. When he started that, you heard about it. And I was the executive director. He was like the chairman emeritus. Basically, he called shots, right? So I was the lackey. So he calls me up and he says, "Hey, dude." I'm like, "What?" He said, "I just got $1 million." I got $1 million from the Communications Union of America. Now, I can't really tell anybody this because, like, the American Jobs Alliance is kind of like a conservative thing. I just got $1 million from them. And I got it to go against TPP. This is like September of 2014. I'm like, TPP, what? What the hell is that? He said, "Well, that's a transportation partnership thing. I got $1 million. What are we going to do with it?" Right? I said, "Well, I don't know. Let's, run ads and stuff." So we kicked that around. And then he says, "Well, we got to get a spokesperson. Who should it be?" And we're batting. He's going to Pat Buchanan. We're like, "No, he's too old." So then I'm like, "Well, what about Trump?" Right? Because he didn't have to. He said, "Great idea. I'll call him up." So then day goes by and he says, "Hey, I'm going to call him today. I'm going to call his office. But what's the hook here for Trump? Because we can't pay him for this. He got demand. What's the hook?" And I said, "Well," I just popped in my head. I'm like, "Well, tell him, knowing Trump, he's kind of a narcissist type guy, big TV guy. Tell him he'll come radio ad and run all the ads in all the early primary states. Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, Virginia. Let's see how that goes." So he did that. So he goes into Trump's office. This is Curtis Ellis, right? Goes into Trump's office. He's still on TV, huge star. Goes in there with a tape recorder that big, one of those little mini microphones. And he gets to record his ad where he spent $1 million on. But that's the big Curtis. He was fearless. He had tremendous confidence, and just one of the funniest guys you'll ever meet. And when we did I would go around the country with my radio show and do various bus tours. And Curtis always came. So in 2016, during New Hampshire, we went to New Hampshire and we went to Manchester. That was before the primary there. And apparently I didn't book it early enough. And all the hotels were booked. So we had to stay in a Motel 8 in like 30 miles away. I don't know the last time you stayed at a Motel 8. I think it's 2 rooms down from a Motel 6. But we checked in there. And he's like, "Okay, first thing we have to do is go to the Dollar General over there, the dollar store, Hey, you're good. We can stay here. Look, you can't do that. So we actually went there, we bought all kinds of insecticides. First, he didn't like insects, right? So we did that, but we went to New Hampshire, we went to Iowa 2 times, we went to South Carolina. And we were together all the time. And we had such a great time on my show. This is a fun thing, I can't give you the personal thing. But he would make fun of everyone. And it was absolutely hilarious. I know many of you have seen that. And the people at the White House that, were never Trumpers, he would mock them. And just all of it. But he is the funniest guy. But I never did anything without talking to him. He never did anything without talking to me. So it's a very tough situation. He was a wonderful man. He believed from the bottom of his heart for everything he did. And although his political affiliation changed, his principles never changed. Curtis believed in putting working men and women at the head of the table. And he was true to that from day one until he made his last breath. My show would not have been where it is without Curtis Ellis. I wouldn't be the man that I am today without Curtis Ellis. My company wouldn't be the same without Curtis Ellis. The country wouldn't be the same without Curtis Ellis. And quite frankly, my heart would be the same without Curtis Ellis. We love you, Curtis. We love you, and Maxine, thank you so much. And thanks everybody for being here. It was really a wonderful guy. Thank you.
We one other speaker, I'm a little out of order, so I apologize. Jan Yelkanek is a friend, newspaper editor who worked with Curtis.
So it's absolutely incredible to hear all these stories. I'm a relative newcomer into Curtis's life. And it's so humbling to listen to all these different things that Curtis has accomplished, some of which I just simply wasn't aware of. Rabbi Hank talked about how Curtis was into, in general, protecting people, how much he valued people. I'm going to talk about it from a bit of a different angle. And I'll use the anecdote of how we met, which was actually just only about 2.5 years ago. So I was in Tennessee, and I believe that Curtis was doing one of these events that you can see over there at the USNCA event. I think this one was about tax cuts. He had done it earlier. He was interviewing a new congressman with Benjamin Crowd, and the vice president, Mike Pence, was speaking afterwards. And I thought, I attended part of this event. I thought he did a great job, and I ran into him at the airport in Chattanooga. And he, just, hey, that was a very interesting event. Talked a little bit, and I told him I work for the New York Times, and senior editor there, and his eyes just lit up, and he said, I used to work for you guys 10 years ago. Wow, 10 years ago we were a lot smaller than we are today, and it was just kind of shocking to meet someone casually at the airport who had done that. He was writing travel actually for us that he had told me, and I just had no idea about this. But then what he said was, with this phone, he said, back in 2000, I interviewed Lee Hongzhen. Lee Hongzhen, those of you who don't know, is the teacher of the Falun Dafa or Falun Gong spiritual movement in China that the Chinese Communist Party started persecuting in 1999. One of the most marginalized groups in China to this day. Now, so he excitedly, and the connection of the founders of Falun at the time, they were Falun Dafa practitioners, seeking to expose what was actually happening there in this climate where American media were basically taking Chinese Communist Party talking points and just writing them as if they were fact. Now, so this is really a testament of Curtis being a friend to people and to marginalized people and people who had hate propaganda pushed out against them, straight out of 1930s Nazi Germany, same talking. He was ready back at a time when, very few people even knew what to think, to stand up for people who basically had very, very few voices out there. And on his phone, he basically shows me, look, here's my photo of interviewing the teacher of Holocaust. It's incredible that he had it with him. So we connected, and I was just starting a TV show called American Thought Leaders. And I had not, I think he was probably the 5th guest that I had. And I think I could say he was the only, or maybe one of 2 or 3 regulars. I had a rule where I would only have a guest maybe once or perhaps twice, with some new ideas, fresh ideas. Curtis, I had to bring back regularly because he was, on these 2 issues that were raised repeatedly here on the issue of China. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But of course, the other issue, which was, I guess, economic nationalism, trade, and this sort of blend. This was just unparalleled in being able to talk about these things in a very easy to understand way. I heard that reference as well. So there's something that you might recall that Secretary Mike Pompeo had this talking point about China and the Chinese Communist Party that I had never heard before. I had been aware of it for years, being someone who worked in Chinese rights circles and then later transitioned into journalism. Secretary Pompeo would talk about how the Chinese people or China are not the Chinese Communist Party. This was perhaps one of the biggest pieces of propaganda that the regime was able to sort of inflict on both the Chinese people and the world, that they're equivalent, that they are actually representative. And from what I understand, from talking to various people in the administration and friends of the Trump administration president, that Curtis actually played a significant role in making that, I guess, understanding part of U.S. foreign policy, which again, I hope that it sticks around. I don't know if it will, but it's a very, very critical piece, and it helps understand the reality of China a lot better if you understand that one very simple fact. I'm going to miss Curtis deeply. I'm so humbled and honored to be able to speak. I mean, I haven't known you. There's people here who have known Curtis for decades. It's incredible to be exposed to such a robust and valuable life. And I'm so honored to have been his friend. I'm so honored and humbled to be able to be here and share a few words with you. Thank you.
Our next speaker, you right here on the screen. I can say a lot about this next speaker. He's our brother. We're all praying that we're we hope we don't get this one and that one. I really love the idea that so many people will touch the purpose. Our next speaker is our brother Rick. Rick's sweet with parents. He had a lot to say. I'd like to introduce him now. We'll get up here fast. We got Steve Vandenberg. Rick and I were friends, not just brothers, but friends. I don't use that word lightly. Banding around for a long time. We have friends who become retired, they're flat tire. But Curtis and Rick and I are serious friends. It's Rick now.
Curtis is amazing in so many ways, as we've heard from many already. But first and foremost, he was our little brother. As I tried to think about what to say today, I knew there were going to be a lot of accolades about his professional accomplishments. But to me, he had so many other roles in life. What I decided I really wanted to speak about was what it was like to grow up with Curtis. I remember that growing up with Curtis was always in the middle of things. As young as 6 years old, he was beginning his political career. I remember him following the Kennedy-Nixon election. He kept a scrapbook of everything he could find. He watched the debates, followed the polls, and totally understood what was going on. Needless to say, he was a Kennedy supporter. He saw the possibilities of what a better world would look like. He always taught me, his older brother, many things. He introduced me to the potential of environmental fate of the planet when he handed me a copy of Rachel Carson's Silent Spring. He was maybe 6 or 7 years old. From that time forward, he was always giving me books to read. So many of these titles were complex treatises on ideologies that shaped our view of the world. Even in our last phone conversation, he was telling me about books that I needed to read. That was Curtis. When he was in middle school, he went to school dressed in bell-bottom pants, a neighborhood jacket, and wearing a peace symbol around his neck. At lunchtime, he came home and went to his room and came down in old blue jeans, a t-shirt, and old sneakers, one painted to look like the American flag and the other painted to look like the Viet Cong flag. My mother wanted to know what he was up to. He told her the principal sent him home to change because his clothes were unacceptable. And so the revolution began. By high school, Curtis had become a full-blown activist. He began to write his own underground newspaper and distributing it throughout the school. As you can guess, the administration was not happy about his venture into the world of political media. He was able to make a deal with the school and graduate early as long as he left them alone. Little did they know this would be his future and his legacy, working for the better of the world by writing about the inequities he saw. At this point in time, he became involved in what many identify as radical activism, which he saw as a future way to make change. Together, we three brothers became involved in the anti-war movement, which quickly grew into more action. From anti-war to civil rights to environmental causes, Curtis never was one to just follow. He was a born leader who was always out front organizing for change, leading him to a life of commitment to the greater good. His boldness led him to meet people like Abby Hoffman and Jerry Rubin, who introduced him to showmanship connected with the movement. The idea that politics and showmanship could be an effective way to move the general public to take action stayed with him. During his time, he came to know people like Allen Ginsberg, Lawrence Ferlinghetti, and Graham Greene. Curtis even taught Bill Clinton how to bet on a trifecta at a horse race one time. I'd get calls from him saying, "Guess where I am? The Ken Kesey tent at the Grateful Dead reunion, or working in another country, writing about the latest injustices." He was always seeking out those who could expand his view of the world. All of these avenues were his way of trying to create a better world and be a spokesman for those without a voice. Curtis helped me develop my desire to create a better world for everyone. It's not often that a younger brother influences the ideals of the older, but that is what leaders do, and that is exactly what he did for us. I have always shared with my friends, family, and colleagues the same thing over and over. Do you want to know what my little brother Curtis is doing now? And I always had something important and profound to tell them. Now, I won't have new stories, but I do have many more stored for the future. Telling these and others will be difficult at first, but I know saying, you know what my little brother Curtis did, will become easier day after day, and Curtis will be with me and everyone who will listen. I have one more story to tell, one that gives me comfort during the difficult times. I have a horse, Tucker. He and I go out riding whenever we can. It's my way of reflecting on things. A day or two after we returned from New York, after Curtis's death, we went on a trail ride. Tucker generally spooks at the deer on the trail. On this day, however, both the horse and I saw 3 deer cross the path, a buck, a doe, and what looked like an adolescent. For some reason, Tucker stood still, and we watched this little family on their track. Later that week, I was telling a friend about this experience, mostly about how well the horse had done. Our conversation was overheard by her partner, a Chickasaw. He interrupted to share with me that in Native American beliefs, animal appearances occur after the death of someone to share a message with the survivors. He told me that the deer, particularly in this configuration, represented a family, and that Curtis probably wanted me to know he was with our parents and he was safe. It gave me the peace I needed at that time. Peace, little brother, and to all of you, thank you.
I only have one thing to say about the next speaker. Maxine?
How to talk about ever fascinating Curtis
Ellis.
Why every
Day with him was an adventure. So many tributes have come in calling him a passionate crusader for the American worker, whose ideas and activism initiated principles that brought manufacturing and jobs back to America. An American hero, a great man. To me, Curtis was my hero, the love of my life, and my best friend. Met him at a party 23 years ago. Real downtown New York loft party with lots of people. There he was, those blue eyes.
that dashing style. Oh, charm.
Our first date, he took me to the theater, a Broadway show. Afterwards, a quaint French bistro for dinner, to La Bienne on West 51st Street. Proper date and very romantic.
And I love that he put
Thought an effort into it. That's the way Curtis was when he cared about something. His work, his personal life, he put love, thought, and effort into everything that mattered to him.
Curtis loved
Life, he was
so full of
wonder. Sometimes he would call me on the phone so excited. Come down, gotta take a look at the moon.
and I'd go downstairs and I'd see
And see the full moon with a sly smile. Or we'd be riding in a car and see a gorgeous sunset. He'd stop and get out saying, "Can you imagine if we just passed and didn't see that sunset?" When he was first diagnosed, Curtis said, "Let's do something never done before." So we hopped a New York Waterways ferry to Red Hook, Brooklyn, and then feasted on blue crabs on a restaurant terrace overlooking the water, listening to a blues band playing on the street below. Whether we were at the movies,
and Curtis
who cried at the sentimental parts, dining out, or he was cooking for me. A good cook. He knew good food. In his cozy apartment filled with plants, books, and Buddhas. Dancing to Frank Sinatra songs like The Summer Winds or You Make Me Feel So Young between courses. Being with him was magic. I realized early on,
there wasn't
the place
and it wasn't the activity.
that made my heart sing. It was Curtis, his special magic. He made the ordinary extraordinary. We still held hands after 23 years. People would come up to us, strangers of all ages, and say, "You two make a great couple." My friend recently told me that sometimes we acted like we were two smitten teenagers. The more we got to know each other, the closer we became and the more in love. Curtis loved to travel. We went to Memphis, where he interviewed Rolling Stone Bill Wyman, then visited him in a summer house in France's Côte d'Azur. Marveled at lions, leopards, and elephants on safari in Africa. Put lovers' locks on the Lovers' Bridge in Paris. Took Bollywood lessons in Mumbai so we could dance at an Indian wedding there. And dress the part. You see the photo over there? And stayed till the wee hours at Malungas and in Buenos Aires, where couples displayed their artistry in the Argentine tango. Curtis loved Israel. He loved Israel. He was awestruck at Jordan's Mount Nebo, where Moses saw the promised land. These are just a few of the many. And he wrote about his travels. He was a prolific writer with his unique style and wit. Curtis was also deeply spiritual, a man of great faith who also traveled inwardly, believed in the tenets of Buddhism, Zen Buddhism, and Judaism, and read about the great beings. He meditated every morning, sat on his knees, looked like he was channeling Buddha. And he practiced gratitude. Last year we had a Zoom led by Rabbi Scheinkopf at his synagogue, where the rabbi said, "It's really important to practice gratitude every day. First thing you do when you get up." And ever since that time, Curtis, as soon as he opened his eyes, practiced gratitude. At night, especially the last 6 months before dinner, Curtis would read some of his favorite passages from the Bible to me. He loved the teachings. Last summer, when Curtis was working in Florida, he'd call me and said, "You know, you can really see the sky here. It's so beautiful. You can't see the sky in New York. We have to go to a place where you can see the sky." Oh my God. Now we own the sky. Thank you, my blue-eyed sweetheart, for such a magnificent adventure. Love, laughter, and joy. What a gift you've given me, as I've told you so many times. You have exceeded my high expectations. I love you to the moon and back and beyond.
I want to thank everybody for sharing the memories of Curtis. It's an amazing afternoon, celebrating extraordinary life. I'm just stunned how many extraordinary, wonderful people who Curtis had so much things to say about it. First, I was like making this place into the world honor his memory. Please do what you can to make the world a better place. Thank you. Drive safe.
Okay.
Let me know.
Okay. Yeah.
Elephants on. Elephants on. Elephants on. Elephants on.